All right, everyone. Well, good evening and welcome back to another Discovery Live Ask an Expert. Once again, my name is Ben Gondrez and I'm the Dome Theater Manager at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. And it's my pleasure to get to host this program. If you haven't joined us for one of our Discovery Live programs before, basically the way that this works is we brought together experts on specific topics and we're going to have some conversations with them. And those conversations will hopefully be driven by your questions. So if you have any questions for our experts this evening, feel free to leave those in the comments at any point in the show. For the first half of the show, we are going to have some solar experts to talk to us about solar energy and solar power. So that should be really interesting. And then for the second half of the show at 5:30, we're going to have some composting and sustainability experts joining us. And so if you have any questions about composting or living more sustainably, be sure to put your questions in the comments below for that as well. And before we get started, I do just want to thank Elevations Credit Union for supporting tonight's program. They're one of our really great community partners, and they were instrumental in helping us put together this panel of experts. And if you would also like to support the museum so that we can continue to bring these programs to you in your homes, feel free to donate, make a donation of any size. We would really appreciate that. You can use either the donate button if you're watching on Facebook Live, that should be right below the video here, or you can visit our website at fcmod.org/donate. And again, we just really appreciate any support that you can give. Awesome. Well, with that said, let's go ahead and bring on our first expert. Let's see, Justin.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
This is my boss Ian as well.
Excellent. Welcome to the program, guys. It's so good to have you here and to talk solar with you. So to start off with, why don't you both just tell us a little bit about yourselves, kind of what got you into solar power and what it is that you do as far as solar power is concerned.
So my name's Justin. I'm the sales representative with the company. Work for Sandbox Solar. Basically, I've been working with the company for 2 years now. Just as a sales representative, but I started off doing installation initially. But I have always been interested in environmental studies, things like that. So I ended up going to school for solar energy technology. And the other co-founder, I've known AJ for a while now. So we connected again and got on the same page and started off with the company. Yep.
Excellent.
And for Ian, how'd you get into the solar business?
So I did my studies in environmental engineering and work. I ended up focusing more on energy and building energy. I went back home where I'm from Chicago, starting architecture engineer. We would audit virtual industrial buildings, solve them and know how they could dramatically reduce their energy consumption day to day. Through that, I was introduced to solar projects, and then out here in the state of Colorado, and started working solar company in Boulder. Did engineering and design for about a year or so, and I was living in Colorado, and after a year, saw an opening in the company to innovate and kicked off Sandbox with AJ, founder, and we started up from scratch and been doing installs in northern Colorado since, and we've been growing the company and educating the community about solar energy and trying to obtain our goal of 100% renewable by 2030.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling us all that. So why don't we start with just kind of the basics. What is solar energy and how is electricity generated from the sun?
So solar energy, just the basics of it. So there's certain components in the solar panel, basically collect the sun's energy in a DC energy format, and then convert it to AC energy, which is consumed in your home, electric vehicles through charging batteries, just encompassed from the sun energy, and then converted for everything. we put panels in wide open fields as ground mount systems. We're based out of the CSU Powerhouse building. So on the rooftop up here, we have solar panels all over the roof. Here's Ian with just an example of a solar panel behind us.
Yeah.
So the energy is collected and just worked through the wiring and converted into energy that we use every day.
Awesome. So do you guys mainly focus on residential installations or industrial or both?
So when Ian and AJ first started the company, just here in Northern Colorado, they started doing a lot of off-grid systems in the mountains, all along the Front Range, of course. But since then, we have transitioned into mostly residential projects. We're branching out into small commercial and potentially community solar. Across Fort Collins, there's a couple community solar arrays to where you can buy in, and then basically all the energy is harnessed in one area and it's spread throughout the city to give you credits on your bill. If you don't have a suitable roof for solar, or if you don't have a lot of land, there are programs to buy in, so you can still use solar energy and help out the environment at the same time. Ian here has been working on solar agrivoltaics, meaning that we put up basically solar panels on the edge of a farm. And with bifacial panels, we can capture the sun's energy, but still allow some light to go through the panels. And right here, so
cool. Look at that.
You can see through that.
Nice.
So basically, we can still have plants grow underneath the panels as well. So Ian is working with CSU and doing plant growth studies as well. So we've branched out into a bunch of different sectors throughout the solar industry.
Wow.
Been around for about 5 years now, and we've done great projects basically all across the board. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, that semi-transparent panel is really interesting. Could you construct a greenhouse out of that and be generating power at the same time?
So yeah, that's basically what they are. They're depending on the size of this, the shape of the building and everything. Basically, that will overtake the glass that's on top of the greenhouse. And use it as the same function, but that in turn we can collect the electricity from that and power the building and surrounding buildings around that. Yep,
that's amazing. So it looks like we have our first audience question, and
this is a squash. This is a squash that they grew underneath the solar panels during one of their studies. Yeah,
so it works. Awesome.
It does work. Yes.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have our first audience question here, and Mackenzie would like to know, how do we know if we live in a home that's optimal for solar?
Yeah. So basically, we provide free quotes to everybody. If you want to get onto sandboxsolar.com, we have a simple questionnaire and everything to fill out with your address. Some generic questions as far as your home utility usage, everything like that. And we can get online and provide a quote to you. Basically what we look for, the ideal roof would be south facing with very little tree shading, anything like that. But there are multiple ways to tie in solar to your home. So it kind of varies a little bit depending on the situation of each home. But reach out to us. We'd be happy to take a look for you and give you a quote and see the possibilities for you guys.
Excellent. Yeah. And what kind of benefits could somebody expect to see from installing solar on their home?
Yeah, obviously there are financial benefits as well as environmental benefits. But basically, since the sun is here every day for us, it's just waiting for us to capture the energy. You're reducing greenhouse gases and emissions from all of those harmful chemicals, of course. So there's plenty of benefits. And if you overproduce energy from your own house, that goes back into the grid, which can help out your neighbors as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different benefits for you. Obviously, with the new incentives in Fort Collins and across the nation, there are federal incentives as well. So on the financial side, you can save a lot of money. And basically, be self-sufficient to power your own home, and then push the energy back to the grid to help out your neighbors as well. But yeah, the less we pull from the environment in harmful greenhouse gases, it goes a long way to help out the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about pushing energy back to the grid, but I think the other option, correct me if I'm wrong, but the other option is storing it in batteries. Is that a possibility as well?
Yep. Battery storage.
A little bit about that?
Yep. Battery storage has come a long way in the last couple of years, and it's always evolving and improving. But yeah, there are residential batteries. We've been installing them regularly, specifically here in Fort Collins. I'm not sure where the entire audience is based out of, but there are incentives here in Fort Collins, and they're popping up in other jurisdictions as well. So there's financial incentives, but basically it's a cycle. So you harness the energy from the panels. You can use that energy in your house in real time. So you don't need to pull excess energy from the grid at all. And then whatever excess energy you produce from your panels is pushed back onto the grid, and you get a credit for that. And then any energy from that as well, excess energy, can be stored into a battery storage system that you can use at a later time. So obviously with solar energy, when it's, we collect the energy when the sun is up and shining on the panels, but you can take that energy. So when the sun goes down, your battery will kick in, and you can power your home off that battery energy as well. Yep.
Excellent. That's awesome. So many different options.
Absolutely. We are tying in electric vehicle chargers as well. So your entire home can basically be self-sufficient. So you can have the grid as a backup source of energy, but as the sun goes down, you pull from your battery and charge your car. The next day when the sun comes back up again, it starts the cycle all over again. Yep.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about when the sun goes down. Obviously, we don't get solar energy at that point because the sun's not in the sky. But what about when it's like cloudy or stormy, or other times when the sun may be less visible to us? Can solar panels still generate electricity in those times?
Absolutely. The technology that's around these days is exceptional. So the panels, certain panels are manufactured different ways. So if you're shading a little, I actually have an example right here for you guys. So these premium panels that we offer now, if you shade the bottom portion of the panel, say 10%, the rest of the panel will work perfectly fine for you. In these traditional type of panels, say you shade this section right here, this section could potentially go down, and the rest of the panel will work fine for you. With that being said, like the technology that's out there now, we can produce energy, of course, on cloudy days, even if the storm comes through, if there's a snowstorm, if it's a light storm, even if there's a little bit of snow on your panels, you can still produce a certain amount. And with that being said, they basically take care of themselves as far as maintenance wise. So the snow will melt off the roof and just slide right off, and you'll be good to go again. So you don't have to physically get up on the roof and scrape anything off, anything like that. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. What about just cleaning of the panels? Do they get dusty, and does that reduce the efficiency at all?
Yep, especially right now with the terrible fires just up the canyon and everything from us. We have been experiencing some ash on top of the panels, everything like that. So that will hinder your production, of course, a little bit. But we've just been advising customers to, if you're outside watering the garden, anything like that, take the hose and just point it up there and spray the panels off. The rain will help just to rinse the panels off. And like I said, with the snow and everything, it'll basically clean themselves off too. There are certain services out there to where you can physically have somebody come to your house and clean the panels off for you. But we just advise customers just to spray them off with the hose. That's pretty much all there is to it.
Yeah, seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
And so speaking of the panels themselves, some more, they must be pretty durable.
Absolutely.
We do get some pretty bad hailstorms and that kind of thing around here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the panels that we have these days are extremely durable, and they go through some standard testing that's conducted out of NREL, which is actually based out of Golden, Colorado. But it's a nationwide laboratory to where everybody has to send their panels through here for energy efficiency, certain things like that. So all the tests are conducted here in Colorado, actually. So I know we get some pretty bad hailstorms coming through northern Colorado in general, but NREL will actually make about golf ball sized hail, and they shoot it directly at the panels at 50 miles an hour. If the panels will withstand that, then they pass the test. So yeah, they're extremely durable. We do a lot of we call them removal and reinstall projects, to where if a hailstorm comes through the area and damages your roof, we'll come and take the panels off and put the panels back on for you folks. We've taken off about 2,500 panels in the last year, and we've only found 4 that have been damaged that had to have been replaced. Wow. So that's a pretty good ratio right there. So they're extremely durable. We've taken off panels, and the shingles underneath will be completely fine, but the shingles surrounding the array are completely destroyed. So they'll take a pretty good beating for you and protect your home a good amount. Yep.
Yeah, a nice side benefit, shielding your roof.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously you harness the sun's energy. That's step number 1. But of course, shielding your roof, yeah, they put up a pretty good fight against the hail.
Nice.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we've got another audience question here referring to batteries again. And Alex would like to know, what is the state of solar battery technology when it comes to making solar more efficient?
So the efficiency rates for batteries are pretty high up there with the technology these days. There are slight losses in between the panels and converting to the battery where the energy is stored. But right now, with the inverters that we use and everything, we're looking between 96 and 99%. So all the products are extremely efficient to capture as much energy as possible. When that's converted to the battery system, we can basically keep your battery topped off, ready to go for you to use in your home at all times, whenever you guys would like. So the entire process is extremely efficient for you.
Great. Speaking of technology and just advances in technology, can you tell us anything that, because it seems like, the solar power technology world just keeps getting better and better, and things get more and more efficient. Is there anything on the horizon that you know about that might be really exciting as far as solar power is concerned?
Yeah, we've definitely heard about great projects that are coming out. I'm sure people know about carports. So carports definitely protect your car and everything from hail storms that come through, and you can power your electric vehicle. It's not necessarily such a new technology, but they're getting on a larger scale to where massive parking lots, car dealerships see a great benefit from carports. We have seen floating solar arrays, actually. So you can make a flotation device and put solar panels on them and link them together. So if you have a lake that isn't really being used or anything, you can build this array on there. And there's certain ways to convert the energy through inverters and battery storage on land, of course. But yeah, lakes it's becoming more popular. I know they have some large scale ocean arrays as well. So seeing some incredible technology come out. We've seen basically bifacial glass on high-rise apartment complexes and office buildings, things like that. So you can power your house right there. It's just like normal glass to where you can see out, but it still harnesses the sun's energy. Yeah, there's some great technology coming out, massive projects across the world. Europe is doing a lot of exciting things as well. Yep.
Nice. That's awesome. So we've got another audience question. And again, with batteries, there's a lot of interest in batteries, I think.
Yep.
But Max would like to know, how cost effective are home battery arrays to store solar for use in the evenings? Is that ready yet for consumers, or are we still a few years out? And I think you talked a little bit about this already, but maybe just
absolutely.
Yeah.
Here in Fort Collins, they do offer incentives for battery storage, so that definitely helps out quite a bit. Fort Collins is one of the leading ones that we've seen come out with incentives, but we know other jurisdictions as far as Excel and PVREA are coming out with incentives as well in the next couple of years. As far as the technology goes, we've seen the technology improve dramatically, and then with that being said, the prices have come down in the last couple of years as well. Just on a residential basis, I think it's still a couple years out to just for the everyday user. But like I said, with certain off-grid storage systems, people that have medical devices and everything that need to be powered at all times, it's a great resource as a backup plan in case the grid ever goes down. So there's multiple uses for it other than just feeding back to the grid at all. And the return on investment is balancing out for you a little bit to make it a little bit more feasible for you. But in all honesty, I would say a couple more years and we'll be right at that point to where you'll see it in the majority of homes.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, yes. I had another question. So you talked a little bit earlier about how solar benefits the environment, but can you kind of expand on that some more as well?
Yeah. Like I was talking about with greenhouse gases and pulling carbon and everything like that. So with coal mines, refining coal and everything like that, it's extremely harmful for the environment. So solar panels, the sun is there for us at all times, every single day. So the less we pull from those other industries definitely helps out in the environment. There's huge going green push that we've seen in the last 10 years or so. And it's definitely gaining steam across the entire nation, across the entire world. So yeah, there's many benefits to switching to solar power. Basically, you set the panels on your roof and it's self-sufficient where it takes care of itself. So, yep.
Awesome. And you mentioned CSU and Fort Collins. Are you guys working directly with the CSU and the city of Fort Collins?
So my boss, AJ, is a CSU alum, and we are actually based out of the CSU Powerhouse building. There's some small businesses up on the top floor. So we're not directly affiliated with CSU. We have many ties with them, of course, but we're not a CSU installer or anything like that. My boss was part of the company that installed the rooftop solar on top of the CSU Powerhouse building. So we've done some projects around campus. We did a solar bike station, basically. You could tie in your bike and we put some panels on there. So yep, we've definitely done a couple projects. We are we're under contract with CSU to put panels up at the Pingree location as well for the campus up there. So yep, we've done a couple projects. CSU obviously is a huge center point of Fort Collins in general. So we're happy to work with CSU. We have a great relationship with them. Yep.
Yeah. Do you know if they're doing any research as far as solar is concerned?
With Ian, with the agrivoltaics and studying the plant growth underneath solar arrays, CSU was part of that grant. We received a partnership with CSU for a federal grant to continue on that research. So yeah, we're definitely still pushing forward along those lines for research. I'm not too sure about the study of any actual manufacturing technology taking place in CSU, but there's definitely projects that they're interested in, definitely.
Awesome. We've got another audience question here, and Mackenzie would like to know, how does Colorado compare in the nation as far as solar adoption rates?
So obviously here we get 300 days of sunshine. So Colorado is one of the leading desirable solar industries in the country. We rank right up there with California, Arizona, New Mexico. We produce a great amount of electricity, and Colorado is one of the fortunate states to give back statewide incentives too. We do have local incentives here for solar energy directly in Fort Collins, but there are called net metering programs across Colorado as well. So energy that you overproduce from your solar array, you can sell back to the grid and get a credit for that. A lot of states do not offer any of those incentives for you. So we've seen the solar industry boom here over the last, we've been in business for 5 years, but give it the last 3 years alone, we've seen a lot of companies pop up trying to stake their claim in the industry here. It's extremely popular. And just driving around town, take a look around town, see how many arrays you see up on rooftops. Solar is popping up everywhere. And in the foreseeable future, everybody's trying to go green as far as major utility companies trying to set a point to by 2030, they're trying to be 100% renewable. Certain projects along those lines, everybody's pushing a lot, and solar is one of the leading industries along those lines.
Excellent. Well, we've just got a couple of minutes left. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, Justin, and learning all about solar. I feel like I'm an expert now as well. Probably not, but I just wanted to ask you, I kind of asked this of all of our experts, but for anyone who might be wanting to get into the solar industry, perhaps a young person is watching, what kind of advice would you have for them? What kind of trajectory should they kind of set themselves up on?
I was going to say, do a little bit of research around, we have some smaller programs as far as high schools and middle schools getting into certain studies and trying to branch out that way. But I know a lot of community colleges and universities are expanding their environmental studies as well. And solar is one of the leading ways to get into that too.
Excellent.
Yep, solar is definitely here to stay, and it's got a great foreseeable future in the industry. So, do a little bit of research on who's offering programs, and get your foot in the door. It's a great field to get into. Like I said, it'll be here for the long run and everything. So, it's a great industry. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, once again, Justin, it was a pleasure speaking to you and getting to ask questions from our audience and find some answers for those. And I hope you have a good rest of your evening. And thank you again for joining us.
You as well. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Well, yeah. And for everyone watching, don't go anywhere just yet. We have our next two experts coming up right now. We'll welcome them. Hello, we've got Leandra and Jamie.
Hi.
Awesome.
And this is Justin. He's a part of our backyard farm team.
Excellent.
The soil health expert with us.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, guys. It's so good to have you here and to talk sustainability and composting with you. So as you heard before, we will hopefully be getting some audience questions that I will transmit to you, and we'll get some answers to those. But why don't we just start out with some introductions? If you want to just tell us who you are, what your backgrounds are, and what you do as far as sustainability, that would be awesome. So why don't we start with Leandra?
Yeah, sure. Backyard Farm is an ecological landscaping company. So we do traditional yard care as far as weed and pest mitigation, planting, lawn care, tree care, everything. We start with the soil and focus on the health of the plants, including grass and everything that is in a yard. So our approach is really holistic and nature-based.
Awesome, thank you. And Jamie, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
All right, I'm Jamie, and I own a business called Compost Queen. It's located here in Fort Collins, and basically what we do is compost for you. It's just like a trash service. We take your compostable food scraps. We pick them up every week in a bucket that we provide and give you a brand new one. And then we take them to our farm location, and that's where we do all of our composting. It's an outdoor style, so it's a backyard, done naturally and organically. We don't add anything other than food scraps and other natural ingredients to make our compost. We also do monthly collection reports. We basically measure everyone's input on what we collect, and they look like this. You can see that this person composts quite a bit. And then we give you back your compost in the spring when it's ready, and you can use it in your gardens or around your house, around your landscaping, whatever works best for you. And then we have some extra that you can buy as well. But basically, we are serving the Fort Collins, LaPorte, Wellington, and Timnath currently. And we also have some virtual events coming up. So if you have some questions about composting today, that's great. But if you want to really dig in, we have some Composting 101 workshops coming up virtually. Our first one is tomorrow. It's being hosted by the Poudre River Fest, and that will be at noon tomorrow.
Yes.
We also have one on Saturday, September 5th, which is being hosted by the City of Fort Collins Climate Future. And that one is at 10:30 a.m. And then we have another one at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 26th, which is going to be hosted by the Gardens on Spring Creek. So you guys can shoot me your questions today, but if you want to get any deeper, then check those out and sign up.
Awesome. Yeah, those sound like really interesting events, and I might have to go check them out myself. Because it turns out I have a lot of questions about composting myself. I just started doing it, and I don't know much about it. So yeah, well, I think a lot of the questions tonight are just going to be mine, and hopefully some from the audience. If you do have questions, once again, for anyone watching out there, please do feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will ask them of our experts. So why don't we just start out with a really basic question. What is composting, and how does composting work? And anyone can jump in.
Absolutely. So composting is basically taking the food scraps that would normally go to our landfills and putting them in a process that is going to turn them back into soil instead of sending them to our landfill. And in that soil, all of the nutrients, minerals, good things that are in the food scrap. So, say you have a banana that has calcium in it. That banana peel or banana that you put in that compost is actually going to put calcium into the soil that it makes. And then once you use that soil on new plants, it's able to reabsorb those nutrients. And so that's why compost is actually really a good fertilizer for your gardens or landscaping in any time of the year, really. But it's much better than synthetic because it's all natural and it's very bioavailable for all the plants that you put it on.
Awesome.
Yeah, we actually Jamie and I work together. Both of our companies we complete a cycle of farm to table, table to farm. So Backyard Farm really concentrates on food production in our backyards, cultivating the soil. And with that, then our customers and our clients can actually compost with Jamie so that they're getting the full experience and the full cycle of where their food scraps are coming from and then where they're going to, closing the cycle of sending food scraps to the landfill.
Wow, that's awesome.
Something else I may add to the information provided is that the most important part of the whole process is that you're facilitating microorganisms. My background is in soil microbiology, and so understanding how important microorganisms are to growing plants is critical. And so when you have a product that's going to add a safe place for these bacteria to have basically a home, if you can think of it that way, for years to come, then they're present in your garden as you're doing your gardening, and it's just a much more efficient way to use those nutrients for years to come.
Yeah.
And if I may jump in and add on to that, along with those microorganisms, so when you send your food scraps to the landfill, they actually create greenhouse gases such as methane and carbon, CO2. And instead of putting those things in the landfill, they will get released into the air as gases. When you compost, those gases, those things actually get trapped into our soil and are not released into the air. So by composting, you're actually helping the whole global warming situation as well.
That is super interesting. And that was actually going to be one of my questions is, what does happen to the food scraps that we send to the landfill? So thank you for answering that before I even asked it. So we've got a question from the audience here, and it says, what's your favorite fun fact about composting that seems to surprise people?
Probably things like what takes the longest, honestly. All the food scraps, they decompose at different rates, and it really just depends on how much moisture is in them, how thick their skins are, things like that. And one of the things that I found takes the longest to decompose, which I wouldn't have really thought, is avocado skins. They take a really long time, and it's just kind of an interesting fact. Just that's the way it is. But another interesting thing, actually, I've learned since doing this and doing all my reporting and carbon analysis is that when you compost 1 pound of food scraps, it actually equates to saving 7 miles of gas driven in a car. So basically, if you were to drive 7 miles and there's a certain amount of carbon CO2 that's let into the atmosphere, you can actually save that by composting 1 pound of food scraps.
Right. And then on the other side, for every pound of produce you grow in your own yard or on your own property, you're sequestering 2 pounds of CO2 from the air. So partnering those two factors together really decreases your carbon footprint when it's consistent and year after year.
Absolutely.
Something I find interesting to add for people is most people, when they think of composting, they're only aware of one model of composting. And there are just so many composting models. There are anaerobic and aerobic and thermophilic processes. There's also vermicomposting utilizing worms in the process, as well as biochar. There's just so many different models you can utilize. You can also compost sort of right in your soil using green crops and then turning them straight into the soil, therefore burying them and keeping the nitrogen from escaping back to the atmosphere, trapping it in the soil as well. So there's just so many different models, and they all have their valuable uses. But something else I find interesting that most people don't know is that when you do an aerobic sort of composting model, you tend to have more of a floral scent to your compost, whereas when you do an anaerobic, it's more of a rotten or a smelly sort of scent, just because of the different microorganisms processes, and it gets into some deep science, but they just release different sorts of chemicals. It's just interesting.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk a little bit about how someone would get started composting. What's the basic process? It sounds like there's maybe a couple of different processes depending on what you want your outcome to be, perhaps.
I think a safe place to start is collection. I think I'll pass off the torch to Jamie on that note.
So to start, and you know what, Leandra's actually very right. One of the biggest things that is going to get you going is realizing what is compostable, what isn't, especially dependent on what type of system you're going to be using. Most people here in Northern Colorado use an outdoor system. So we call it backyard composting. It's probably the simplest. And with that, you can do all kinds of food scraps, but the main thing that you can do that you shouldn't do is meat products and dairy products, just because in that type of system, those things are actually going to spoil and rot and potentially have harmful bacteria that would ruin your compost, and as well as give all the little microorganisms not a good place to thrive. And so that's one option. That's actually what I teach in my Composting 101 workshops that I mentioned earlier. There are a few other different ways. There's the bokashi method. Now, in this method, you can actually compost meat and dairy products because it's done anaerobically, as Justin was saying earlier. And that is done in a sealed container. And you basically put in all your food scraps in that sealed container and let these little microbes do their job. They just eat it all up and without air. And when you open it back up after a certain amount of time, it does look pretty much like dirt. And then let's see, what am I missing? Oh, and then there's also the industrial system. We do not currently have them here in northern Colorado, but Denver does. And so those places can actually take meat and dairy as well as compostable things like compostable packaging. So sometimes you'll get your food to go and the container says it's compostable. You can definitely take those to an industrial facility. This is one of the biggest differences in Compost Queen versus an industrial facility. We are not an industrial facility, so we cannot take those things. But it's because of the thermophilic process that Justin mentioned earlier, and being able to get to such a high heat to actually decompose that type of matter. And so they can take, compostable bags, utensils, paper products, those types of things. And those are pretty much the three main ways here. Oh, and then there's vermicomposting, of course. It's a lot like backyard composting, but you use worms pretty much in addition to it.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, I'd like to give a shout out to EcoCycle out of Boulder, who does collect those types of things. Backyard Farm partners not only with Compost Queen to help reduce our carbon footprints and our members' carbon footprints, but we also partner with EcoCycle, who takes a lot of what we can't give Compost Queen, like the packaged stuff, the meats, the dairies. So there are other avenues to find to do a complete compost for all of your food waste at home.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good to know that eat the things that are marked, the forks and the cups and things that are marked compostable. That's not just throwing it in your backyard compost bin. That won't work.
Not unless you're burying it really deeply.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll get someone to dig a hole. Awesome. Well, that was all really great information. We've got another audience question about starting. Someone wants to know how to start their own garden to grow food. So she says, what's the easiest way to start a garden to grow their own food? What veggies should someone start with? And she says she's really bad at growing things. So any tips and tricks to help overcome that?
Yes, I'll start off by saying you're not really bad at growing things. It's the soil that's really bad or really good at growing things. It's our job to make sure that the soil is in a good place to start. Without all of the factors, you really don't have anything to go off of. So I would say, what is your light value like? Where are you trying to plant in your yard? And then from there we say, well, these are good crops for a lot of sun, or these are good crops for a lot of shade, and then design your garden based off of those factors. Where do you get a lot of water from? Maybe if you have a rain catch system, your garden boxes are going to be closer to your rain catch system or whatever you have going on. And then it just gets down to the fun part. What do you like to eat? What is it that you want to eat more of? Maybe you really like snap peas or kale or carrots. And then from there, you're just successively sowing all throughout the season to get as much as you want. But always, always, always start with the soil.
That's awesome.
And Justin, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. I'd just love to add that I like to think about traditional foods that were grown here. And so beans are really easy to grow here and do very well. They also help the soil out in the right situation. So beans and snap peas, as Leandra mentioned, are just so fun because they grow really fast and you get this beautiful thing you can eat really quickly. So for a new gardener, getting that win is really important. Corn and squash do really well here as well. They're longer season commitments, especially corn. So maybe not first year, but definitely squash, peas, carrots do pretty well as well.
Awesome. Well, and you talked a little bit about a rain catchment barrel. Can you talk a little bit about more about that and what that is, if people aren't familiar with that?
Sure.
And maybe some other, sustainability things, tips and tricks that you might have for people?
Absolutely. Rain catch laws changed in Colorado fairly recently. I would like to say within the last 5 years. And we are now because silly enough, it was illegal to collect rainwater on your own property. But now you can have up to 2 55-gallon barrels to property to a residential property. And in agriculture, it changes, but in a residential property, it's going to be 255 barrels per household. And the system itself is very easy to set up. You can order the parts from Lowe's or Amazon, and it's just an install into whichever downspout you want to put your barrels near. And then there's just a connection hose that goes between those two. And the diverter system that was installed into the downspout actually automatically stops filling the barrels once they are full and then continues down the downspout. Since there's a connector or a faucet onto the rain barrels, you can then use that water for drip irrigation or tree watering, a lot of different things you can use rainwater for, just not drinking, unless you do a huge process of reverse osmosis.
Something that's wonderful about rainwater is it tends to have more nitrogen in it. And so that's why most people after a rain see a much better growth in their grass, much faster than they would just using, water from the city. It's that nitrogen that's there that adds that.
Awesome. And speaking of grass, I guess one thing that I'm curious about is when you mow your grass, the scrap from that, can you compost that, or should you just leave it on? Is it okay to leave it on your lawn? Does that benefit your lawn at all? What's kind of best practice as far as
If you want rows of dying grass on your lawn, you can leave it, but a lot of people want just the green. So that's valuable organic matter. When you cut your lawn, those clippings can definitely be composted. They can be even left on your property in a pile somewhere where you just don't even see it and you ignore it. Maybe a few other things get left over there, like leaves and small twigs. But later on, after a few seasons, you're going to fold that over and really see some nutrient-rich material that otherwise would have just been thrown away or taken to a landfill. So again, as Jamie was saying, going back into the soil instead of into the atmosphere is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and I keep harping on nitrogen, but it's the most needed nutrient for everyone who's thinking about gardening. Nitrogen is the one used most by plants. It's what makes them look green. And so nitrogen, when that grass is left on your lawn, after a couple of days, you'll notice it'll turn brown, right? You've probably seen that before. Yeah. So what happens is nitrogen is known as the noble gas, and it actually always wants to go back to our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is like 98% nitrogen. So when it turns brown, the nitrogen's gone, and what's left is the carbon. So if you can take that grass clippings and make a pile, the outside may brown, but if you came back a month later and peeled it open, you'd see that the grass is still green inside. And so you've trapped that nitrogen and kept it from going away, thereby being able to add it back to your garden or back to your grass or whatever you're going to do with it later.
Awesome.
It's a much more cost-effective and sustainable way of amending your yard and your soil to provide you with the nutrients that you need to grow what you want to grow. Because everything needs nutrients. And a lot of the time we buy packaged amendments and litter our whole yard with fertilizers when really our yard provides us everything we need to fertilize it. It's just a matter of harnessing it and recognizing it and then practicing it.
Yeah, awesome. Talking more about composting, I guess, one of the questions that I have is, how do you know when compost is done and ready to be used in your garden?
So the easiest way to do that is when it looks like dirt, pretty much. Because when you put food scraps in, you have your apple cores, your banana peels, your pieces of fruit and vegetables. Once those things don't look like food anymore, it's pretty much ready. Personally, what we do at Compost Queen, we actually send in our finished compost to the CSU soil testing lab, and they actually give us a breakdown of all of the nutrient levels in it, so that way we know that it's complete and it's finished, and that's when we bag. But for you guys at home, that service is available to you through CSU soil testing lab, so you can do that. But if you just want to kind of do your own thing at your own house, you don't have to. It does cost money, so it's not necessary. But yeah, once it has that deep brown It should be moist. It should not be too dry. And yeah, it's pretty much going to smell like deep earth. And once you get that, then you can pretty much put it anywhere.
Love it.
Yeah, really short. That's a really great explanation. I appreciate you doing that. A really short version. I mean, you can get really scientific with it and crazy and follow the thermophilic recommendations of 10 days at this temperature. But that gets kind of crazy. But there's a hot period for thermophilic processing, and then a cool period of curing, so to speak. But it happens pretty quick during the summer, a little longer in the winter. I generally tell people if you're composting over winter, it'll be ready in the spring. When you're ready to garden is the perfect time to throw it in there.
Really?
If you're doing vermicomposting, you can just basically build a pile, and then your next pile, build it next to it. And when the worms leave the pile, you know they've exhausted what's there, and now it's time to use it. They've left their worm castings behind, and you've got a wonderful amendment for your soil.
That's awesome.
And just to add on to that, the thermophilic process, what that means is you're getting it up to a high enough temperature to A, kill some of the bacteria that might be in there, B, kill some of the seeds that are in these things. So if you throw away a pumpkin, or excuse me, compost a pumpkin, if you don't get it to that thermophilic stage, those pumpkin seeds are probably going to start growing. And your compost pile will be a pile of pumpkin plants. So that's why we do that, and that's why you can get scientific about it. But it is part of the process that you want to do, because if you don't get it up to that, and then you pour your compost, say on your lawn, you're going to get some pumpkin plants growing in your lawn, and that might not be exactly what you're going for. So.
That's what we're going for. But
pumpkins would be okay, right? But thistle and dandelion or whatever your favorite weed is in your yard, bindweed or whatever, you may not be as happy about.
That would be bad. That would be bad.
Kill that before putting it elsewhere.
Yeah, I actually wondered about that the other day. I put an avocado pit in the compost and I was like, I wonder if this is going to grow into an avocado. But it sounds like not if I get it up to temperature. Awesome. So I have another gardening question. You see a lot of times raised beds and different things. What would drive the decision to do a raised bed versus just in the garden or in the ground gardening? What are the benefits of either of those?
Sure. So that's an easy answer for a Coloradoan, because we have a lot of clay. We have a lot of clay and a lot of sand. And most of the time, if your yard has not been cultivated or focused in the soil, a lot of the time it's going to be compacted, because that's what lawns do. They compact the soil to create clay. And so that takes a lot of labor to turn up all of that soil, depending on how much you want to grow. Sometimes it's not that much. If it's a small bed, it's totally worth it. As long as you're getting in a good mixture that's maybe locally sourced of compost and topsoil, not a bunch of packaged soil. It's really easy to check in with your local agriculture alliances and see who is available to give you some soil. There's people who are even willing in the community to drop it off to your house. So that's what we really focus on, is just what's the easiest way and the most practical way to introduce the landscape sequestering and production. And the raised bed is the answer to that, because we actually source our wood from Humboldt, California, and it's called Humboldt Redwood. And it is a zero impact building material, because the company actually plants more and stewards more trees than it harvests every single year. So we've been very meticulous on our sourcing for these kind of adaptations that we have to make based on our climate. Whereas on the East Coast or the West Coast, you could just dig something up, plant a couple of seeds, and it's probably going to grow as long as there's some compost in there. So it takes a little bit of more work for us because we're so high in elevation, but we've adapted, and now we build raised beds. We fill it up with really great soil, and then we focus on starting from the beginning rather than going against the earth and really trying to work with it there.
And you certainly can go either way, but something that Leandra talked about was the clay. Additionally, we have very alkaline soils, so our soil pH is very high, whereas in other places it's closer to neutral or maybe even slightly acidic. So plants do prefer that range. So we have to, if we're amending our own soil, just consider what we're adding to bring the pH down a little bit, which most composts are more acidic in their nature. So they help with that, and working them in really well is really important. Because plant roots need to breathe. A lot of people don't know that. They think all the breathing happens in the leaves, but the roots need to breathe too. They need to do gas exchange processes. So if you're working with your clay, you're going to need to dig it and really aerate it and mix it with some other things that will leave space for air and water.
A lot of the time that is packaged amendments, unfortunately, but there are ways around that. Gypsum is great for breaking up clay. If you want to work a small bed, maybe start it over a little bit, then you can add those specific types of amendments and just locally source them to maybe divert the packaging that you're going to get from a major department store.
Awesome. I guess just what other tips do all of you have for anyone who just wants to try to live more sustainably? And yeah, anything.
Jamie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So to live more sustainably usually means reducing your carbon footprint, which can be done by composting. It can be done by growing your own food. It can be done by, let's see here, driving your car less. It can, riding your bike more, those types of things. And it is really important right now that you at least think about these kinds of things, just because we do have a global warming crisis on our hands, and any little thing that you can do, whether it is just, riding your bike to work, or, putting your banana peel in the compost pile instead of the trash, those types of things, it's any little thing is going to help make a difference for everyone. So, do what you can and see where it goes.
Yeah. I'd like to say that the biggest thing for me as far as living sustainably or more sustainably is really ties back to food and the human food chain. Everything needs food. Everybody needs food. Everything needs food on our planet. And a major part of the global warming crisis and the heating of our planet and the changing of our climate is our excessive feed operations to supplement CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. And there's nothing wrong with eating meat, and there's nothing wrong with eating whatever you want. The thing to being more sustainable, I think, currently is being aware of where you're getting those things and the process that they went through to get to where you now have them. When we grow our own food and do our own compost, we become more self-sustaining, and thus we become more sustainable, because we're not pulling so much energy from the rest of the world just to get ourselves fed. And there's so many people who are here, especially in Fort Collins, who are here to support that type of lifestyle and that shift in thinking of, how can I get local produce? How can I get local meat? Because then you just took back the control of that food chain, and you stopped big agribusiness from clearing another forest for more feed for cows. So that's my biggest thing, is just the sourcing of the food and everyday things. If it can be closer to home, then it's better.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, definitely reduce. Everything else comes after reduce. All the technological advances we have are wonderful, but if we first focus on reduce, that's the most important one. After that is to just think about the life cycle of a product. How long are you going to use it? How long is it going to be in your life? Where did it come from? Where did the things that made it come from? If it's produced locally, is it truly produced locally, or are there things that come from somewhere very far away? Just accounting for those ideas.
Awesome. Well, those are all amazing suggestions and ideas. And I hope that everyone who was watching tonight took something away from that and can maybe live a little bit more sustainably themselves and grow some veggies and make some compost. So awesome. Yay. Well, that does bring us to the end of our time. I just want to thank all of you for joining us for this program tonight. It was so great to chat with you guys and get to know a little bit more about all these amazing topics. So I hope you all have a good evening, and hopefully we'll see you around. Awesome.
Right. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank
you
you so
for
much.
hosting. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Talk to you later. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, everyone out there watching, thank you for joining us. And once again, if you'd like to support the museum, please do consider making a donation. You can either, if you're on Facebook Live, just click that little donate button right below the video, or go to our website at fcmod.org/donate. And hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's episode of Discovery Live, Ask an Expert, and we will see you at the next one. Have a great evening, everyone.